Hey everybody, welcome back. In today's lesson I'm going to show you how to go from a paper template to a three-dimensional form using the stiff slab construction technique. To be successful with this, we're going to need some type of original template, and you're going to need some slip and a pre-stiffened slab of clay. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in and we'll get started. Okay, so my objective is to go ahead and take my paper template and turn it into a three-dimensional form. First things first, you want to go ahead and cut out a paper template, any shape or size you want. And you got to roll out a nice even slab. And I rolled this one out last night. It's actually fairly stiff, but it's still slightly flexible. To illustrate that, I've cut a little piece off the side. I can pick it up. It's not easily bending, but I can still shape it and bend it without it snapping. But it's also going to hold the shape, so it's way more rigid than normal. So first things I have to do is trace out my sides. I'm going to need two sides. I'm going to try to maximize my space. Maximize my slab use. I try to keep the tool straight up and down when I do this, so it doesn't cut any angles. There's going to be excess clay that you could use potentially somewhere else in the build. First thing I need to do once I cut out my sides is sort of get an idea about how deep I want my piece. You can really do that by just holding it off to the side and see how deep you want. Now I've decided to cut it about 1 inch deep. So I'm just going to trace this and cut it. I'm going to need two sides and enough for a top and a bottom. Okay, I have all my materials ready. I have two sides cut from my template. And I have the depth, which is about 1 inch and 1/8 I've decided. Now I have my slip, and I'm going to be able to score these together. I'm going to go ahead and score all my seams. I like to put the walls directly on top. As I've also rolled out a couple small coils I'm going to need to support that seam. Okay. Not only am I going to score the bottom where it's going to be attached, I'm also going to score a little ways up the side on the inside. This is longer than I need for now. I'm going to get some of my slip and fill up my score marks. And you can see this is still somewhat flexible, so I can come in and go straight to my first turn. Line up the outside wall. I'm pressing down with my thumb. And I want to push hard enough down so I see some of my slip squeezing out the sides. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I like to go a little bit further than my corner here, and I'll be able to cut it back. Okay, you can see I have my seams on the inside that I need to strengthen. Now it's not absolutely necessary to do this, but it sure makes for a stronger piece, and it also gives you options in rounding the corners later on if you want. If you're going to see these coils, you want to make it as pretty as you can. You don't really want to see any of the process marks unless it's going to be completely hidden. And the more you compress that clay in there, the stronger it usually is. In this case, I know it's going to be a little bottle form, so it's not going to be visible. So I just want to make sure it's well connected, and that's all I need to do. When you go back to my last corner, it's going to be coming straight down, so I just need to cut straight down where I want the angle, where I want the angle to go. Okay, so I'm going to piece two little chunks of clay to follow my design. You can already see that the shape has a lot more rigidity. I'm going to do the same thing with the top. Try to piece in two little chunks. So far, so good. Just going to take a little bit of wet clay and pack it in my seam. Okay. Looks like I'm ready to put the top on. So I'm going to slip and score everything. You want to make sure your walls are nice and straight. You want to envision this paper template almost being extruded out of a machine. This is also a time where often I'll take a little paddle and just lightly work that seam. Not sure if you can see anything, but there's a little bead of clay on the inside. I'll be able to compress that with my finger, or like a back end of a needle tool or an eraser, some tool along those lines. I also like to take a rib or a fettling knife and compress that seam just a little. I'm going to go ahead and let this sit, and we'll go ahead and put a top and bottom on it when I come back. Okay, so my piece has been sitting around for a little while. I can tell just by picking it up that it's homogenized a little bit. Water's migrated from the seams into the body of the piece. Now I need a top and a bottom. So first thing I'm going to do is start with the base. I'm going to take an extra bit of slab I have and just trace this. It's okay if it's a little bit bigger. You can see in this case, this piece was a little bit more narrow than the one I'm making now, so I actually purposely made the base a little bit wider for stability reasons. But this is wider, so I'm just going to cut it flush. Just anytime you're scoring, just make sure you vigorously, rough up the whole area. If you just draw a few lines on there with a needle tool, it just simply is not going to work. Apply a little pressure. I'm going to wiggle and push down. If I don't feel like I'm going to do any damage to the top, I'll take a paddle. This does a great job of compressing that seam. You should see a little excess slippy coming out the sides. All these edges will be cleaned up later. But I do want to get the excess slip off. There's no reason to leave it on the outside. Okay, we'll let that homogenize, and then we'll clean up the seams. Now the top is a different story. Now I don't want to put a piece on here and change my original design. So what I'm going to be doing is slotting a little piece of clay in here. I've already marked the width. You can kind of see this area is tapered inward. And so is this, so it's going to just squash in there and compress. So I've made a mark where I need to cut to. You can see it's just slightly tapered on both sides. Double check on that. I need to make it a tiny bit smaller. You want this to fit pretty tight. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and slip and score everything. About a 1/4 inch down. Okay, I'm going to try to drop that in there. I've actually opened up the sides just a little bit. And I want to feel the pressure as that wedge starts working. Feels like it's in there. Again, I like to squash the sides. Make sure it's really jammed in there. Anytime you're building almost anything with slabs, when it's shrinking, it wants to shrink all different directions. So what you're going to want to do is just dry these nice and slow. Not including the base. We're looking at my original design. Looks like everything's in order. Okay, I'm going to let this rest, dry a little bit, then we'll come back and clean it up and figure out what kind of top we want for it. and then we'll be all done. Okay, my piece has been sitting for a couple hours. It's much stiffer. It's still leather hard, so I can still add a top, soften all the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and start with that. To soften the edges, I really like to use a Surform RASP, or I could use a rib or even a knife. On these corners like this, I'm just going to use a flexible metal rib and just pull and bevel all these edges. And any straight edge, I'm going to go ahead and use this Surform. Okay, it's looking pretty good. What I want to do is I need to put a top on it. What's nice about using these templates is that I can have the same body and have all different kinds of tops, from a tall bottle to a square top. With this last one here, I just did a little sort of flask top. I went ahead and made another one of those. Nothing more than a flattened slab that I just lightly pinched the top. And I like to make a few different shapes. Go ahead and look at the profile and see if I like that. Sometimes there is no right or wrong answer with these. Since everything is very angular, I also made a square top. You see I have a very low profile top. It's interesting. And a little bit taller, which is what I think I'm going to go with. For some reason it just feels like it fits the form a little bit better. And I'm going to be beveling this edge just a little bit once I attach it. So I do want to center this top. And once I feel like I have it centered, then I go and mark it. I'm also going to take a needle tool and mark the inside edge. This is what I'm going to be cutting out. Okay. I'll go ahead and cut this out right now. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and score this whole area. It's gotten pretty dry, so I'm going to vigorously score it, add some slip, let it sit, and then potentially score it one more time. I always score an area a little bit bigger than I need. This little top was made out of 4 little leftover pieces of slab. Okay. Now, just like all my other seams, I want to press down and wiggle slightly back and forth. This is going to get it to really seat well. Okay, do a little preliminary cleanup of my seam. Okay, so now I want to take this edge. You can see it's really sharp there. What I'm going to do is bevel it ever so slightly. It's going to also echo this angle on the shoulder. I'm going to once again go with this Surform. You can hold the Surform at the angle that you want and pull. Giving this top a little bit more of a finish. Okay, I'm liking the way that looks. Other than a final cleanup, I can do a little sponging, I could put colored slip on there, I could notch it, I could basically do anything I want, still it's wet enough. This piece is done.